This is Meg Cole. She teaches at an independent school in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne in a grade 1 class. She has 32 years teaching experience and is going to talk about effective formative assessment practice for literacy.
Thank you very much. I use different formal assessments to check out my children's reading level. So probably one of the most common things would be running records, and I'm sure those in education would be familiar with the range of readers at different reading levels. I found this particular assessment is very worthy. It informs me as to whether the child uses picture clues to understand the text they're reading and also to recognise words. It informs me as to whether the student has good sight vocabulary, whether they can decode unfamiliar vocabulary using their phonemic awareness, and very importantly, it also informs me whether the child has a good comprehension of the text that they have read and whether they can read between the lines for inferred meaning. So that's one particular test. There's another particular test which I found quite valuable, and that is the Waddington Diagnostic Reading Test. This is good value because it's not something I need to administer one-to-one. It's a test that I can give a whole group of children and they can complete it independently and simultaneously. It's a good test in that it begins simply with pictures where they would need to identify the initial letter of the picture itself. Each group of tasks in the Waddington test gets progressively more challenging until eventually they are needing to comprehend really complex vocabulary in complex sentences. This particular test would give you a standardised, because it's a standardised reading test, it can give you the reading age of the child. And that, of course, you compare to their chronological age and you can identify whether they need to be extended or whether they need reading recovery. There are various tests that I use to assess their spelling ability. First of all, we use Magic 100 words and Magic 200 words. So that would be initially just recognizing those words, but also being able to encode those words in spelling. There is also the South Australian reading test, and this, similar to the Waddington Diagnostic Test for reading, will assess whether they can encode simple words, progressively getting more difficult, and it's a test that you would administer to the whole class. So those are a couple of the tests we use, and probably if you have a look at what is behind me, our particular school uses the THRAS method of teaching handwriting, reading and spelling strategies. And there are various THRAS tests which would inform me as to the child's phonemic awareness and what we need to work on to improve that. In terms of their listening and speaking skills, we work with rubrics quite a bit, and in one particular term they need to actually compose a number of questions that they are going to use to interview their grandparent. This ties in very well with our theme, our integrated theme it's got a historical basis, and they need to interview their grandparent and find out what their favourite party game was when they were a child. Now, they are following a rubric, which I know would probably be quite hard to see just on the camera like this. This rubric gives the child the criteria they need to use so that when they are reporting back on the interview they've had with their grandparent, there are certain skills that they need to practice and actually show in terms of public speaking. So they would need to know that when they are speaking to an audience, they need to use projected voices and their speech needs to be clear. They need to have used a well-rounded mouth and those final sounds in each word need to be clear. So in speaking, they also need to learn the skill and practice making eye contact with their audience, connecting with their audience and keeping their interest. This particular poster is a really good example where the child has mostly done the work themselves. Obviously, encouragement and support has been given at home, but they have composed the sentences themselves, and it is a step-by-step procedure that they are telling to their classmates. I think that just gives you a glimpse of the sort of testing that we do in our Year 1 class. And there are many other examples of fairly informal testing that we do. We do writing every Monday morning, which is really writing from their own experience, perhaps their weekend happenings. Perhaps we've gone on an excursion and they are relating in sentences what the experience was all about. We also reversion popular children's stories where they are read part of the story and they would suggest an ending. And we also publish our own books. And it's a big book that has an excerpt of each child's piece of writing. And this is a great form of assessment. It's typed up, and that would be my job, but I'm typing their exact words and they are demonstrating to me that they have got a good understanding of the purpose of punctuation, capital letters and full stops. So that would be a fairly good example of the sort of writing that each child is giving me. I found this a great motivation for the children because it is celebrating their writing ability. These are put out every morning during their reading time while I'm listening to individuals read to me. The rest of the class would be having what we call dear time, drop everything and read. Silent reading. And we've got many properly published readers, and we've also got our big books, and they love going back to their big books and rereading what they and their classmates have written. Thank you.
Thank you.